Hello. Guten Morgen, Grüß Gott, Assalamu alaikum, Shalom aleichem. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for responding. That's very nice. I would like to invite all participants to please have a seat. Today is relatively free seating. As everybody is taking their place, let me just say that today will consist of 3 parts in the morning and 3 parts in the afternoon. Very simple. Everything this morning is here, and this afternoon will be mostly in small groups in order to be able to go to the practice of dialogue and go deeper. And then we'll finally come back all together for the closing plenary final session. So that's the program for the day. What we look forward to doing, especially in the afternoon, is to translate much of the rich thoughts that we learned about and shared with each other yesterday and this morning into practical recommendations for KAICIID in our work on the ground around the world, and especially in the Arab region through the Arab platform, given the context of how this particular conference emerged. So, let's first begin with a brief video that was done in the evening, very late until last night, and this will summarize a few key thoughts about yesterday. Thank you.
Hate speech is not something which is defined under international law. However, we all know what we mean when we speak about hate speech. We are seeing it every day, particularly in recent years. And that is why we have to bear in mind that hate speech is an attack on diversity. It is an attack on tolerance. It is an attack on peace. It is an attack on the principles and values which are the backbone of the United Nations Charter. And the same values, we found them in each and every religion.
Real leadership is based on inspiration for others to follow. And we are all different in identity, but we are all equal in dignity. This is ethical principle. And political conversion of this principle means equal, dignified citizenship for all, in the Middle East, in Europe, in the world.
Hate speech generates vindictiveness, anger, revenge. It generates fear from the other and from otherness in general. And as I said, it weaponizes everything around, even religion.
Social media are almost the invitation for a hard and aggressive language. They are partly anonymous, and it is proved that in the social media the aggression of the language is growing, and the language and the sentence and the hate speech can have disastrous consequences in certain circumstances. And so it is not only my opinion, it is the opinion in general, and the opinion of the European Commission and the opinion of the General Secretary of the United Nations, that hate speech is a danger, is a problem.
We have, therefore, to understand that hate speech can be a risk factor to the commission of the crime of genocide. Hate speech can be a precursor of crimes against humanity. And that is why we do not have a luxury to remain passive, to remain just listening. We need to take action.
So we need to take action is the message, and that will take place especially this afternoon with your recommendations. And so please be aware of how important that is to our work and to making sure that we can decrease hate speech and hopefully eliminate it over time. The first part of this morning has 3 guest speakers, 3 eminences from different religions from the Middle East. Unfortunately, 2 of the 5 names that you have on your program send their deepest regrets because of very frustrating logistical reasons they could not make it here this morning. And so the first is His Eminence Rishma Sattar Jabbar Hillu, who is the head of the Mandaean community of Iraq and the world. And the second is Chief Rabbi Pinchas Goldsmith, Chief Rabbi of Moscow and the president of the Conference of European Rabbis. So they send their deepest apologies again. But starting first this morning, we have His Grace Bishop Marcos, who is the representative of Pope Tawadros II, who is the Pope of Alexandria and Patriarch of the Coptic Orthodox Church of Alexandria. And His Grace Bishop Marcos is himself the Coptic Orthodox Bishop of the Diocese of Shubra El Khema. Please, tfaddalu.
بسم الإله الذي أحب.
In the name of our Lord, who has loved our creation and created us and gave us this earth. Every one of this creation started to worship God in the way He wanted, in the way that suits Him, in the way that they have a beneficial relationship with God. We thank the Lord for His mercy and for every circumstance. We also thank God for this opportunity to meet together and for the opportunities to meet together always in the pursuit of peaceful coexistence and a peaceful life and a good peace that everybody in the world hopes for, so that the first message when Jesus was born, the angels sang, "Glory be on earth and happiness on people." And when Jesus sent His apostles onto the world, He recommended to them to say, "Be at peace, say your peace to every village and city you go into." So we humans need peace to live. And a person who can't live in peace, even colloquial proverbs say that this person cannot even sleep well. This person lives in extreme and continuous tension. And so our message always in our meetings is, how can we spread peace in the human relationships, in the human itself, and in the learning of understanding the others and accepting the others. Our holy book says that there is no greater love than putting people ahead of ourselves. A person who pursues to live in peace seeks also the comfort and easiness of the others before themselves. So if everybody strives to find peace for the others, then we find peace for ourselves and for our world, and there wouldn't be any conflicts. But the problem is everybody is only seeking their own peace. But if we strive for the peace in all countries, in the souls of our brothers and sisters, then we would achieve goodness and well-being in the world. And our duty is how to put forth a new message and a new way of living for people to spread peace amongst others. And we thank the International Dialogue Center, KAICIID, for its effort to point out all the differences and diversities in our lives and the togetherness, so that we when all of us, each of us, go back to our countries, we can start with a dialogue of loving each other, the dialogue of striving for wellness of the others or for the well-being of others. So if we work together on these concepts, and if each one of us goes and spreads these concepts in the communities in which we live, I am 100% sure that the societies will change greatly, of course. Of course, the communication technologies that are grand at this time, of course, television is not as important today, and the newspapers are also losing ground. I am talking about the social media contact possibilities that are spreading immensely, how we can send a message to the whole world. Now, I think I would wish for a site on these social media networks that can put forth all the positive sides of all religions in the world. This can make people look away from negative sides, because the negative can destroy, can be destructive. So I would wish to form a site on these networks that includes all the values and principles for the development of the society, for the development of its cultures, for the development of the interrelationships between humans. And this can convey the message also to policy makers and decision makers. When they get this message, they will start to put the legal basis, foundations for the real participation between the people in a homeland, between the people in the whole world. And I am sure with the help and trust of God, there will be very good that comes out. In our part, we make very good efforts, for example, in religious holidays. Religious people from all dominations gather together. They go visit people in their homes, and they give presents also to the children. This is a way to bring children to see that everybody is a good person, and that through relationships, through participation in the religious holidays, be it nice or bad occasions, when we live together and exchange and participate in all these events, then we plant the seed of love in the youth generations and children. We plant the seed of interhuman relationships so that nobody can discriminate based on religion, because religion belongs only to God. And there is a verse from the Bible: show me your faith through your actions. This is how we see the faith of each other, through the way we deal with each other and through our love relationship in our society, so that the children and the youth generation can see it and live by it. And so adults and grown people have the responsibility to be the role model in living this love for the children. And also, I wish that there is also the point in education and rearing in school that teach the way to be and exchange with other peoples. I think religious education can be only held in the holy sites of prayer, but the education of talking to each other, of living with each other, should be in the curriculum of the schools, for a society that is giving, that is loving, that has in it the seed of love and giving and generosity. And this brings forth a strong society in which the children have got the good principles. The religious education, we can leave it to the houses of worship, but we need the education. Of course, for example, our church establishes many clinics and hospitals, and of course, all patients are welcome. Also, when we establish schools, form schools, the school accept pupils from all religions. And I think if we can put religion out of the curricula and replace it with education, with ethics education, I think this would be very good in bringing the society together and in common purpose and in common citizenship. And so then we will have the feeling that this society coexists, is cohesive, and has a relationship of love between its citizenship continuously. We wish that our principles that we are talking about here, that we can start spreading them to the next generations, so that even from the time of early childhood, children live together and play together without thinking about religion, wealth, culture, gender, or race. When they start in the daycare, in the nursery, to play together and speak together without any differences, then this is the first step to make the society a healthy, well society based on the common grounds of coexistence. And I hope that we can put the seeds and water this plant for the fruits of the coexistence and love in all our communities. And hopefully the message will get through to the decision makers, so that following that, the legal laws can be changed for coexistence and common citizenship. And I thank you very much for your conference, for the organization of this conference. And of course, I thank His Excellency, the Secretary General, Mr. Faisal bin Abdul Rahman bin Muammar, for this great program and for this rich program and conference that is filled with diversity of people, of backgrounds, of religions, from which we can learn very much. And hopefully, inshallah, we can increase these efforts and we can bring forth fruits of these efforts. And I really would like to recommend again the forming of a site on social media networks where people can join in and put the positive sides of religions. Because when God created Adam and Eve, He created them one, and we are all sons and daughters of these people. And may God reward our efforts, and thank you.
شكرا جزيلا يا باشا.
Thank you very much.
His Eminence Saleh Al Hakim from Iraq, who is chairman of the Kalima Center in Iraq. لو سمحت تفضلوا.
In the name of God, the most merciful, the Almighty, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, a very good morning to all of you. Thank you so very much, Professor Patrice Boudeur, and let me express my gratitude and thankfulness to our brother, Dr. Faisal bin Muammar, as well as the organizing team of KAICIID, who worked hard, and I think I have the feeling that all of them are one family, which is the secret of their success. I'm really happy to be part of this family, and so God will, we'll be able to provide for the happiness of mankind and for a better world. Today's topic is very important. It's very vast. It's comprising religion, media, politics, policies, and its role in countering hate speech. Well, in reality, I think that These three pillars, very eminent pillars, should play a great role in countering this kind of speech, a speech which is an illness, which is spreading around and which is dangerous for everyone. But creating hate is also produced by these three pillars because they are the ones to create hate, and in the end, they are not able anymore to control it. So we are stand in front of a very difficult balance. Yes, this should not depress us because all of us should play their roles, and every good world is like a growing tree. Its roots are in the ground and its branches are high in the sky. So religious leaders, religious institutions do not only play a role in countering hate speech, but also policies, politicians, decision makers, they create hate in order to reach their very short-term objectives, short-term aims. If they would think about long-term aims, they would refrain from hate and hate speech. But apparently, if mankind comes to power, apparently he forgets about his thinking, his mentality. Hate speech, ladies and gentlemen. So hate was not born with mankind, with humans, and God Almighty did not plant it in humankind's instinct. So it's part of a satanic culture based on illusions and illusions which in the end lead to arrogance, to haughtiness, to insolence, and to superiority, which make people forget their morals. Also, wrong education leading to closed minds, to fear, and to suspecting everything, suspecting everyone, looking at everyone with suspicion, which in the end creates hate in the hearts of humans. Hate would lead in the hearts and in the minds of those who are not as strong, would lead to more fear, would lead to unknowingness, to illusions, because of closed mind, of course, would lead to not knowing things, to not looking at things, not seeing things as they are, which in the end would lead again to hate speech. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, that this industry is basically, as I said, is drawn up by decision makers, by leaders, by politicians, and we, being religious leaders and also the elite of thinkers, we should deal with it, and we should know that hate speech, hate, is an illness spreading and reaching out to everyone. So us, being religious leaders, being protectors of religions, we should concentrate on steps which I think we are in bad need of. So it's not just a matter of addition, because we need to deal with this illness, an illness spreading like a virus spreading very fast around the world. So first of all, we need to work very hard in order to provide recommendations and advice to decision makers in order to hinder such hate speech, in order to hinder such culture to reach families. Because extremism is not the basis. We need to control such actions. We need to control such actions, which is hard, of course. But it is us to try to counter hate speech, to counter the financing of hate speech, with the culture of countries and societies. Of course, there are mechanisms, and we should look into these mechanisms, but our time is too short to look into all the details. Secondly, also, we should separate religion from political directions, and we should not give the possibility to politicians to use holy signals, to use the mantles of holiness, and allow religious leaders to foster their positions by using political words. So, political leader only gains power if he has people following him. But if he only follows a dictator, for instance, or a politician, so a religious leader does not have any power. He loses his power and cannot foster his importance. So separating religion from politics is one of the main grounds in order to be able to protect religion. Thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, we need to foster the common grounds between religions because, of course, hate speech would turn against such common grounds because you'd fight hate speech, which turns against religious leaders of Islam, of Christianity, of Judaism. So we need to draw up a very clear concept in order to fight this common alien, this common situation. But I don't know, I often ask myself, why do religious leaders do not speak out, do not reach out to the other? Now, unfortunately, I see religious leaders only living in their very limited scope. So this is one of the major topics and one of the major objectives we should work for. Also, we need to foster common grounds, as I said, because the culture of hate would demonize all religions. So we need to go beyond personalities. We need to go beyond our ego. We need to reach out to each other. So we leads should reach out to each other. We should stand up against hate speech together. And here, let me kindly recommend to you to create a sort of group to monitor or a cell to monitor and follow up on movements of hate, on hate speech. And also for this group, I'd suggest for it to reach out to scientists and specialists for countering hate speech in order to deal with this phenomenon. Also, I'd like to suggest to build up or create a scientific cadre, a professional cadre, which would specialize in detecting falsified religious understanding, in detecting falsified religious texts. We need specialists, we need journalists also to foster what we do with this. Was fourthly. So as a fifth point, I'd like to point out that we need partnerships. We need partnerships between the different religions and cultures. We need those partnerships to move away from discussions, but to stand up together in order to spread the culture of one mankind, of one belief in mankind, of one family. So unfortunately, neither us, as being religious leader, do we concentrate on common grounds. On the contrary, journalists do not concentrate on common grounds. We need to stand up together. We need to see that we are, all of us come from one mankind. All of us have the same roots, excuse me. and we live in a human society which should reach out and is very close to each other. As another point, number 6, I'd like to point out that we need to move away from stereotypes, may it be intellectual stereotypes, regional stereotypes, cultural stereotypes, religious stereotypes. We need to move away. We need to open up our minds, ladies and gentlemen, in order to overcome the Stone Age we are still living in. So this freedom people are talking about, it doesn't mean that freedom would comprise that you leave and walk out on your religion. No, freedom is to respect the other, to accept the other, to see the other, and to respect the faith, the religion of the other. So respect and looking at the other, respecting the other, understanding the other would in the end lead to know the truth. Seventhly, we need to overcome stereotypes in our research because many researchers would write studies, but these studies are far away from reality. And these studies are then published not only in universities but with the academia. So we need to look in our research, to look at the reality we are living at, to look at mankind, to look at the problems of humankind. Otherwise, those researchers and scientists would live on one side of the river and societies would live on the other side. Also, we need to spread the culture of peace, of hope, of peaceful coexistence, of love, ladies and gentlemen, in order to overcome wars, to overcome differences, because the basis is always the respect for the other, the respect for the characteristics of the other, and also dialogue. So we need to build up better relations between politicians, between decision makers, and also religious leaders. So we need to go on, ladies and gentlemen, this is my 10th point, we need to go on to look for the truth. The truth has to be the basis for us to proceed. And I need to be brave enough to speak out the truth, ladies and gentlemen. We are in bad need to reread our alphabet with open minds, with open hearts, open for the reality, because we all know, ladies and gentlemen, that globalism and also technology and developments need people to stand up to it. Now, of course, we are facing, as people say, we are facing the 4th digital revolution. We need to deal with it. And last but not least, we need to commit ourselves to be the defenders of love and peace instead of asking for war, instead of asking for hate. We need to look for partnerships instead of oppression. We need to look for dialogue instead of individualism. We need to look for coexistence instead of separation. This would lead us to understand that our interests go along with it. Then we shall be successful. May God grant us success. May peace be upon you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
شكرا جزيلا سيد صالح.
Thank you very much.
For this morning, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdel Wahid Arifi, who is the Undersecretary of Islamic in the Department of Islamic Affairs in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So please, تفضلوا. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام
Praise be to Allah, the cherisher and sustainer of the world, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, and may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, our Prophet, his family, and all his companions, and all prophets. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon Muhammad, upon Ibrahim, and upon his family, as the blessing on Abraham. Your Excellencies, Your Eminencies, my speech today, I will try to comprise some of the aspects of countering hate speech in our good faith and in our land, which has taken upon itself the logo of Islam as a religion for itself. And as you know, all religions and all religious leaders who have spoken have pointed out how religious texts counter hate speech and counter violence in order to foster cooperation and relationships. And our Prophet Muhammad, may the peace, mercy, and blessings of Allah be upon him, has pointed also examples of mercy. So in Mecca, with unbelievers, he was a very good prophet to them. They laid their trust in him, and they laid their trust for him to keep things for him. And he himself gave this mission after his migration, gave this mission of giving the things back to these people, to Al-Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. So, of course, may God forbid, as we know that that the Islamic religion counters the hate of speech. As we know that the Prophet, may the peace, blessings of Allah be upon him, he would receive Christians and Jews and hear them out, and also he used to deal with all non-Muslims and coexist and co-live with him. And when he died, his shield was in the hand of a Jewish man who had taken it to custody for him. And this shows that from the very first day of his noble life, our Prophet, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, lived the example of good coexistence and gave these as role model for every Muslim to live in this way. And as God Almighty has commanded us that every person should honor their parents in all conditions, even if the parents expected unbelievable things of this person, maybe even to change their religion. And also from his great life of the Prophet and of his companions, we see these great examples of coexistence. So the question remains, where did this hate speech come from? How did we get to the point of the hate speech? And this is a point I think must be studied and must be observed, especially in the KAICIID International Dialogue Center. As you know, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, it takes Islam as its religion, and it takes religious texts to counter violence and to counter also a hate speech and to foster coexistence. And this is something that we see as true. And I believe that media outlets should point out the honorable religious texts in this issue, because there is a deficiency in the transmittance of these great examples and great religious texts on behalf of the media outlets. The late King Al-Malik Abdul Aziz bin Abdul Aziz al-Rahman was, in his reign time, had his own counselors and advisors, amongst them non-Muslims, and even his ambassador to the United Nations, Jamil al-Baroudi, was also not Muslim, and his friend and historian, Mr. Adib Raihani, was also not Muslim. And Fuad Hamza, a Druze who was an ambassador for the King Abdulaziz in Paris and in Ankara. So why don't media outlets point out all these examples, all these great beneficial examples for the coexistence of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia since its foundation with other religions? And the King Abdullah, peace, rest his peace, he worked with Sheikh Harkan for dialogue and for discourse of what we believe and what we implement in our homeland. And in 1974, a message from the Holy Pope Paul was received in Saudi Arabia to welcome the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And so the king assigned a delegation from Saudi Arabia, assigned them to go to Vatican and to meet the Holy Pope in a very famous visit and trip. And so King Abdullah, the late King Abdullah, also visited the Vatican and met the Holy Pope Benedictus in 2007. And this was also one of the great contributions of the late king, which represented in KAICIID for coexistence. And now in our time, in our prosperous time, in the reign of King Salman, we see also that the late Cardinal John Louis Turan in 2018 hosted a conference in Vatican for KAICIID, and in 2017 received the Pontifex of, and he received Joel Rosenberg, the head of the delegation of the Council of Evangelical Churches, and they had a fruitful dialogue where everybody shared his points and their common ground in the different religions. And of course, our king, may God save him, King Salman, is making great reforms, starting a reform wave in the country. One of its pillar points is countering the hate speech, and he said 2 years ago, we will destroy it immediately, meaning the hate speech, and we will not indulge the hate speech to be continued and to live forth on. And of course, the Ministry of Islamic Affairs in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has done its contribution in holding conferences in many places, in Kazakhstan, in Beirut, in Vienna here, and in every place where there is a voice that can be heard for dialogue and for countering hate speech. And His Excellence, the Minister Abdul Latif Al Sheikh, as an advisor for the Islamic speech in the kingdom, is very careful and very urgent in monitoring the hate speech and in preventing irregular voices to emerge in the kingdom. And from our successful experience, we can mention that there was established a call center for communication, which is open to the public. So if anybody saw that one of the imam or the sheikhs of Friday khutbahs, if he heard that there were points of hate speech or incitement in this khutbah, that they can report it to the call center and tell them about it, which is a way of countering hate speech practically. And the Excellency, the Minister, has declared time after time that he will never allow this emergence of the hate speech. This is just a small recount so that I would like to remain in the time frame. This is why I recounted briefly the experiences in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And I think the key question is, how did we get to this hate speech? And the second key question is, how can we get media outlets to look at the bright and great examples and show and disseminate these examples? And may the peace and mercy and blessings of Allah be upon you and be upon him, the Prophet, his family, and all companions. Thank you very much.
Shukran jazilan.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency Sheikh Mohammed Al-Uraifi.
More speakers who sent their apologies. One of them is from a very, very tiny community, the Mandaean from Iraq, and in no way replacing him, but last minute there was a request to actually listen to a message from the high priest of another incredibly small community that only has about 850 followers left after a long history of more than 2,500 years. And so the representative of the high priest of the Samaritan community is with us. So I invite Mr. Yaqub Abdallah El-Kahin to come and share a message from the high priest. A very brief message, I'm told. Thank you.
أسعد الله صباحكم أحبتي. إليكم.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May I share with you the message of the high priest, of the representative of the Samaritan, which, of course, as you know, is a very old religion, a very old faith, which goes back to more than 3,658 years.
شيما ويشمارك يا إرشيما فانو إليك ويا إينك يشا شيما فانو إليك ويا شملك شالوم يباركك الله.
May God's blessings be upon you. May He shed light on your soul. May He protect you. May He give you peace. My brothers, first of all, let me share my thanks and gratitude with you and with KAICIID, who put the Samaritan once more and brought it back to the map of the world, and who accepts and once more today they allow us to speak here, bringing us back to the map. I come from one of the oldest religious faith.
لا تقبلوا خب.
I come to you from the holy mountain of Jabal Jarzim, and I talk to you about being witness of all, as the Lord has commanded us to be a witness on oppression and to be kind to everybody. And these are all holy verses that come in all religions that call for mercy and kind-heartedness, away from all racism and harsh measures that are built on basis of differences of religion or family ties. We can say that our world is in the midst of a organized Cold War that has the means of spreading satanic thoughts that incite for the belief of being different. And now, in our conviction that the world has become so small in the hands of the social media and the communication networks, this social network has become a play scene for people who are willing and intent on spreading hate and spreading these hate messages for millions of people, especially when it is financed by money. And this has caused people to hate each other and to distract themselves with all the hate cells in the world, and to pursue power in which a means of it is hate speech. We should look to make all these creative outlets to be a means of spreading good words, because it can be two-sided, the media. How can we find good information that we can spread and say, I am making the start and you go on and finish, to open the space to spread and love and respect messages and respect others, and to understand that only science can save civilizations. When we spread the word that somebody has won a scientific award or prize, you would be very happy to him. These networks were actually founded so that we can use them well and not make them a bomb, a great bomb that will spread destruction on the world. And so if we let it be a ticking bomb, we would forget that our purpose on the earth is to live freely and to make and to be loved and to love people and to make peace and not war. Religions are not guilty of sick personalities and sick psychologies, because God has always called for the well-being and the coexistence of people. And all the prophets and messengers of God were an example, a role model for this way of living. We must depend on those who are enlightened, that believe that good messages can be spread through electronic and social network media outlets, so that they are used in a great way and not in a bad way. Before I conclude, I would like to share a story with you. Of course, we in Palestine live as Christians, Muslims, and Samaritans in love and in coexistence. About a month ago, I was working with one of the organizations. I went to an organization where the employer was a Muslim, but he is a very good friend of me, and he helps me with all my documents and all the issues that I do. He gives me very great help, and he is a good friend of me. We had a national holiday of the Samaritans, a feast, where he came to us to visit us, and he talked to me in gist. As a joke, he said, well, I would like to visit you on this feast, but my sheikh said this is haram, this is not allowed to go to the feast of the Samaritans. And he was just only joking. But actually, I imagined, what if the sheikh really had said to him it is haram? So I called a sheikh of the city of Nablus, and we made a meeting with him, and the sheikh said, no, it is actually your duty to go to the feast of the others and congratulate them on their feasts. And also we must work together as a conclusion to raise the slogan that God is innocent of terrorism, God is innocent of violence. So let's amplify this message in all networks, and thank you very much.
شكرا جزيلا سيد يعقوب.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yaqub Al-Kahin.
One very, very brief little piece, and it's not again in replacement of Rabbi Pinchas Goldschmidt, but one of our dear board members, he was been part of the founding part of the board of directors of KAICIID, needs to leave this afternoon and will be missing therefore the closing session, unlike the other board members, and so he would like to just say a very few words, right? And so Rabbi Rosen, please, there we go. And by the way, just before Rabbi Rosen speaks, I just want to say how important the notion of social inclusion, is to the notion of social cohesion. At KAICIID, we work towards social cohesion, and we practice inclusion. And so being able to invite Samaritans, Mandeans, Yazidis, is part of enlarging and recognizing the diversity of the different areas, in this case of the Middle East, but of course in other regions of the world as well. So on that note, please.
Assalamu alaikum, shalom alaikum.
May peace be upon you.
To be able to have this privilege. But I think Dr. Patrice slightly misrepresented it. I didn't request this honor. It was the Secretary General, and I am very grateful for this honor to be able to just say these few words. This initiative, the Secretary General has had many sources of inspiration. To relocate this conference from Beirut to Vienna, especially in light of recent developments, was rather an inspired decision. But he also gave me this honor to speak now just after my brother, the Samaritan spokesperson, has spoken, who opened with words which are central to our liturgy because we come from one source. And he therefore inspired me to greet you with the same words, but not within a Samaritan version, but within the Hebrew version. Yivarechacha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord shine upon you and be gracious to you. May God lift up his countenance to you and bestow peace upon you. And of course, on all Christian liturgy, this phrase is known so well as part of Christian liturgy. So this also highlights the brotherhood and sisterhood of all of us who are here together. One family, Al Ibrahim, who should live within that love and respect for one another's tradition, but unfortunately fall victims to all kinds of evil forces and political manipulations that betray our true heritage and the highest noble values that we are the custodians of. So it is our obligation to ensure that we work together to prevent these distortions. And of course, that is enormously important within the context of this conference. Let me just say that KAICIID, I think, is perhaps the most remarkable interfaith initiative globally in recent times. It's not without its difficulties and challenges, but it's an amazing achievement. And it's been a great privilege, it is a great privilege for me to be part of the board of directors of this historic organization. And therefore, to have this opportunity to be able to say these words to share with you. In light of our proceedings, I have been reminded also by the wonderful contributions that we have heard from the various different religious traditions, including, of course, my own rabbinic colleagues. I'm reminded of a very interesting psalm, which some of you will be familiar with. Psalm, of course, is a Zubur, therefore is part of our shared heritage. Psalm 34, verses 11 to 13. Very beautiful words, which I will try now to translate directly from the Hebrew. Oh, go forth, my children. Listen to me. I will teach you the reverence of God. Who is the person who loves life, who seeks long days to do good? He who keeps his tongue from evil and from speaking guile, who turns from bad and does good. Seek peace and pursue it. These three verses let me now reverse the order for the insight. The sages from the Talmudic period point out that this concluding phrase is a fascinating phrase. Seek peace and pursue it. Nothing in the whole of the Bible is identified as something you have to seek and pursue. Say the sages, Peace is the one thing that you must go out of your way always to seek and to pursue. Seek it in one place and pursue it in another. Okay, so peace is important. But how do we achieve that peace? Let us go back to the verse just before it that says, keep your tongue from evil speech and your lips from guile. If we speak only truth, goodness, and true love and respect for one another, we will bring about peace. It is our misrepresentation, and it is dishonesty, and it is stereotyping and bigotry that prevents peace in the world. And if we want, therefore, to bring about that peace, we must combat hate speech. That's what the psalmist is telling us. That's what King David, the author of that verse, is telling us. Hate speech, evil talk, is the enemy of peace. And therefore, the verse starts that this is what we must teach our children, how to honestly represent the other. This is a very important message, because very often we are nurtured within environments influenced by political interests in which we accept stereotypes, bigotry, negative images of the others as given. And we do not stop to think for a moment, how can we talk about other people in this language? And therefore, while this conference is really important in terms of talking of generalities, and that's important, and perhaps even policy decisions, we here, as representatives of our religious traditions, we have duties of our own. These are to teach our children not to use the language of stereotypes, not to use the language of prejudice and bigotry. And if every rabbi here goes back, and every time they hear someone say something negative about Muslims or Christians, they refuse to let it pass without immediately responding. If every Muslim leader here goes back, and any time they hear anyone use any language of generalized negativity about Christians or Jews, and if every Christian leader goes back and ensures any time they hear someone in their community say something negative about Muslims generically or about Jews, and they will not let it pass, then we will teach our children the right way of goodness and of peace. And we will be the agents that we should be of our religious traditions to make the world the kind of place it should be. Thank you very much.
Toda Rabba, Rabbi Rosen. Always very important to listen to this reminder of our responsibilities, and it's in terms of words and action, of course. It's my pleasure to invite my colleague, Martin Newland, the Director of the Communications Department at KAICIID, who will be the moderator of the panel that is now to come. Thank you.
Distinguished delegates and guests, I am Communications Director for KAICIID, but more importantly for this particular session, I am the last great dinosaur of the West in terms of newspapers. But this is relevant. This gives me a perspective which is very important for the purpose of this panel, which is I was at the time editor of the Telegraph in London, and was on the launch of the last two multi-million-dollar international newspaper launches, one in Canada, the National Post, and one in Abu Dhabi, the National. And this happened at a time, a key point where the digital age took all the money out of the traditional media. And as media then had to pursue market share, had to make money, because it was getting a lot less money, it had to shout a lot more. It had to become a lot more aggressive. It had to get rid of context and reportage
and bring in strong voices because it costs a lot less. So there has been, in terms of responsible journalism or contextualized journalism, a great decay as a result of the digital age. And nowadays, people like me, my daughter, can now have access to an information superhighway through her mobile phone. Everyone is now a publisher. I will go on to introduce this panel. It's particularly unique because we have experts from the Middle East and we have experts from Europe. How you join their perspectives together is beyond me, but hopefully something, a common view will come. The context of what we are talking about, hate speech in the media, has slightly different applications in the West and the Middle East. But I'll go straight on. Klara Kalibova is a lawyer, first and foremost. She's an analyst and author from the Czech Republic. She's the acting director of In Justicia. It's a non-governmental organization that deals specifically with hate violence in all its breadth. Klara also is very active, particularly in the field of Islamophobia. In no particular order, Basil's turned up at the end. All right, so I'll go Basil. Basil Tojman, very well-known journalist and political commentator from Tunisia. Broad expertise in the field of North African affairs specifically. He's worked for Shems FM radio in Tunisia, radio, I hope I'm pronouncing it, Mead, Q Post. Anyway, he's got his fingerprints all over the North African media scene and a great perspective to give us. Next, Sultan Al-Saad Al-Qahtani, a Saudi writer and journalist, 15 years of professional media experience. Spent most of his journalistic career working for online journalism, so he should have a particularly good perspective here. He specializes in political journalism. Wow, politics and media, you're at the sharp end. He's editor of the Riyadh Post and the Riyadh Post magazine and presenter of Scattered Doors, the NBC program on the NBC channel. Next, we have Father Rifat Bada, originally from Jordan, ordained priest in Amman in 1995. Father has a very important perspective here because not only does he write and is a journalist and knows about media, but he's a priest and he has the cure of souls and pastoral experience. So a particular perspective from Father Bada on the subject at hand. Alessandra Coppola, am I right? From Italy. She's a trainer, project coordinator, human rights education expert, particular experience in the field of hate speech. In Italy, she's national campaign coordinator of the No Hate Speech movement. It's a youth campaign led by the Council of Europe Youth Department, and it's trying to get young people mobilized on this issue, especially as they are so well connected. And finally, no stranger to me is Burhan Wazir, who is a Glaswegian Muslim, first and foremost. Burhan has worked with me in the past in newspapers. What we need to know for this purpose, for these purposes, is he is an established international writer. He covered the Gulf War, the last Gulf War, the 2003 Gulf War, for The Observer. He writes for The Guardian, The New Statesman. And he has a particular area of expertise in hate speech and incitement in the UK context. But Burhan has a foot in each camp. He's worked in the Middle East and he's worked in the West, and so brings that perspective. So, is that everyone? Yes. I will start with Burhan, please, precisely because of that, perspective that you have. Are there commonalities in the application of hate speech in the media in both East and West? What tend to be the issues?
Morning, everyone. Yeah, I think Yes, I mean, I think there's an interesting way of trying to frame this, which is that I'm old enough to remember when the internet didn't exist. And I began my career working for, broadsheet newspapers in Scotland and then in London. I think the interesting thing about the way the media operates now is that digital journalism, to a huge degree, has proved to be a kind of liberalizing factor. Newspapers can now reach audiences that they could never reach before in parts of the world that they could never, aspire to reach to. But in many cases, this has quite often been this has unleashed a kind of race to the bottom. Newspapers are increasingly starved of resources. There's not enough fact-checking is done. News, as everybody realizes, is much faster. Any reader is now suddenly a broadcaster using a smartphone. What I've noticed, particularly in terms of hate speech, is that as the media tends to kind of scream louder to try and find space and to try and monetize digital spaces, quite often it's the intolerant views that tend to rise to the top. Newspaper columnists, readers, for example, anyone who takes a kind of illiberal view, especially along matters of faith, is quite often what tends to dominate Facebook and Twitter for the next 24 hours. And I was doing a little bit of research this morning, and I couldn't help but find that in the last 5 years in the UK, where I'm from, the number of hate attacks have doubled. They've now, the latest statistic was last year, there were 103,000 hate attacks on the streets of the UK. And I think to some degree, the media has played a role in this by not moderating voices and by not taking a more cautionary approach to some of these very heated topics.
Berhan, can I just ask you, because you have been in the Middle East as well, are there changes of emphasis you would bring in the problem in the Middle East to the West? And secondly, very quickly please, is there a case for regulation beyond what we already have in the West in particular?
So I think the commonality between the West and the Middle East seems to be that large parts of the Middle East are now beginning to embrace digital media, and people are moving away from traditional sources like TV or print, for example. You are seeing some of the very, very same problems that have been emergent in the West. Again, in parts of the Middle East, readers, columnists, everyday journalists are now broadcasters. They don't necessarily need a media organization. And again, what tends to rise to the top on any given news cycle is usually like a tweet or a Facebook post, which is almost impossible to then take down or moderate. In answer to the question of legislation, this seems to be coming to fruition to some degree. There is a general consensus among certainly politicians and some media organizations that there needs to be stronger legislation, especially in digital spaces. Now, companies like Facebook and Twitter, for example, are obviously completely against this. This is how they kind of marketize their platforms. But I think the sea change, which has occurred only in the last 5 or 6 months, is that companies like Facebook have now admitted that they are not just platforms, that they are actually publishers. In countries like India, for example, or Pakistan, Facebook has completely swallowed the local media. Local media does not exist anymore.
Thank you very much, Berhan. Let's anchor this now in its pastoral context with Father Rifat. I know you are an expert in media, but you are also a priest. You also have the cure of souls. What is the cost of hate speech in the context of your service, your pastoral service? Who is responsible? Who is responsible? And how must media adjust its behavior, if at all?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Hani, it's not easy to live in the Middle East, not only for the priests, but for every citizen. It is a complicated life, as also in the world. But in the Middle East, when you have to live in the midst of a multicultural, multi-denominational, multi-religious context, then it is not easy to live. And then for a priest or for a religious leader, it is more complicated because you have to live in a midst of dilemmas, of that you have to preach the gospel of the Lord, the love of Jesus Christ, who said, love your enemy, love each one another, and if you are offended, do not respond to the offense in the same similar way. So you have to forgive. But in the midst of the, let us say, social media or the political life also, it's difficult to live the words of Jesus Christ in the daily life. When he said, love your enemy, and you cannot follow him in that. So you are faced with these forest of hatred and of not willing to live together. But we have to resist. This is our strategy as religious leaders, that we don't have to give up. In spite of the many hatred that we have, but I am not talking about interreligious affairs. Sometimes it is in the same church, on the same religion, that you face these things. And then you have also the new secular life. I am writing since 25 years. In the beginning, it was easier than now. Because in that time, when they saw a priest on the television or a priest writing an article in a common political newspaper, it was easy to accept. And my people were happy to see my name or my face on the television. Now, it is not the main concentration that you show yourself on the television, but what you are saying. And you have to wait for the oppositions to come. If you write a tweet on the social media, then you are not accepted by everybody. Even from inside the church, sometimes you are attacked, you are insulted, and you have to live the message of Jesus Christ. But as also a media leader, you have to calm down the situation, to set the fire off in order not to increase the problem or the crisis.
How do you do that? How do you calm down the...
I don't respond on the insults that I receive daily sometimes on the social media. I don't respond in the same way. Sometimes I answer because the saying that they are saying against me or against the church or against the religion or against sometimes my country, this is not true, this is a rumor. Then we have how to face the rumors in a kind way, but in order to show that the media must be in the service of truth and not on the service of what you are thinking to say for the people. So this is a philosophy of freedom, which freedom we have in our hands, and which sense of freedom we have, like young people now. This is not a way that you say whatever you think about. You have to calm down, you have to rethink before saying anything against the others.
As the misuse of social media in your context, do you believe, how far does the damage go? Hurt feelings? Death? Where? In your region, if you
in my region?
Yes. What is the worst effect of
the Good Samaritan here and Mr. Rosen cited the Holy Bible. So the Holy Bible says that, look, I put in your hands death and life. Choose life in order to be living forever. This is what the Bible is saying. So sometimes we don't have to encourage any incitement or any encouragement for violence in our country or in our region. We have to say that our region, as Arab region or Middle East region, or any encouragement for generating the groups of Daesh, the groups of Al-Qaeda, and the militant groups. So we can have a death groups or we can have a life groups. Let us us encourage always through the social media to be in the life side and not in any time with the death side. Let us encourage
when to
always
shut up.
through the social media to be in the life side and not in
I'll
any
move
time
on, if I may,
with the
to
death
Clara.
side.
Clara, there are two areas of expertise in your field. One is, as I understand from our chat recently, I think it'll be switched on, if I may, to Clara, from the heart. You are involved. One is at a grassroots level with problems of Islamophobia. May talk about that. Secondly, the point that Burhan raised here, if you feel comfortable with it, one of the big problems here, mentioned in both West and all over the other world, is the way the big aggregators, Twitter, Facebook, one of the big problems here, can act as vehicles for the expansion of hate speech and mistrust and marginalization. In Europe in particular, there is a big debate about whether these platforms are in fact just innocent aggregators of content, or whether they are publishers. There is a big debate about whether a publisher of content are, then you have a duty of care to what you're publishing. Big debates, as I can see, certainly I believe in Europe. So on those two things, one from the heart, the Islamophobia, and one from the jurist head, what you're publishing. Big debates, as I can see, certainly I believe in Europe. So on those two things, one from the heart, the Islamophobia, and one from the jurist head, what you're publishing. Big debates, as I can see, certainly I believe in Europe. So on those two things, one from the heart, the Islamophobia, and one from the jurist head.
It's a great role for media, the classic ones and the social ones as well, to support communities and individuals who have been affected by hate speech. As a lawyer, I don't believe in non-punitive hate speech. I simply believe in verbal hate crimes because in Europe, most European countries forbidden inside to hate or defame somebody's hate crimes, religion, nation, or ethnicity. I believe that inside this legislation has some roots in history and that we have need to remember legislation, historical situations, and that genocide hasn't started with concentration camps situations, and that it's not easy to say it on the media conference that speech should be prevented or that there are certain levels to say it should be even forbidden. But I believe that we should really need to be very careful about what would be allowed. But I believe that we always really measure dignity of an individual and affected community with the right of freedom of speech. This is a huge debate which goes years and years. Sometimes I see that freedom of speech is somehow exaggerated and that we really sometimes I see that connection with those people who deeply suffer from being harassed online, or connection with those people who deeply suffer. This is the life of my clients. I'm an attorney as well. I represent people who have been victimized online, who have been victimized also physically. You cannot say that online hate speech doesn't hurt. I have a client, she's a Muslim, and she's been victimized because she's very scarred. Online she's a part of the Czech nation anti-racism. She's a Muslim, and hate speech campaign. She's been victimized online, and it's been a year ago, and since that she is fighting for herself. She had been victimized to the police, she had been to the It's been a year ago, basically, answer very unpolite questions. For example, when did you decide to become a Muslim? Or what is it to be a Muslim woman? Do you believe in circumcision? And this is really rude question which she needs to go through. What is it to be a Muslim because some person attacked her online. And also it's very painful for her. She is losing her belief in the justice because she lost already 2 cases out of 5. Just because also it's very painful for her. She believe that also speak her because she lost already 2 cases out of 5. Just because
But in terms of media itself, I know should it, in principle, be allowed to say whatever it likes? But in terms of media, all right, that's easy to say, but then what restraints can be put without crushing freedom of expression? But in terms of
freedom of
media,
expression
right,
has
that's easy to
its
say,
limits, and these
but
limits
then
is
what
somebody's
restraints
other rights and
without
dignity
crushing
and feelings. So it's not okay to say somebody should be killed, somebody should be raped, somebody should be and I don't know. So it's not a model, and so this is the limits. These limits are already given by at least European judiciary, European case law of European Court for Human Rights, and this is what we should respect. You also mentioned the responsibility of social media platforms, which is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and various others. I believe, and also the European Commission believes, that we should talk with them very deeply about our needs, our European needs, it's not only European needs, and our limits. These limits are already given by at least European their rights and to European their actions. And since 2016 in Europe, the IT platforms voluntarily social media platforms said that they will restrict hate speech online. And since then, really in the environment of European Union, the hate speech decreased online. So it seems that those platforms do something, but from my perspective, it's not enough yet, because there are still incitement to racial hatred. There is still Holocaust denial. There is still harassment of individuals based off their religious beliefs. So I really believe that Facebook and Twitter and other IT platforms are responsible.
Thank you, Clara. We will now move from the Czech Republic to North Africa. Basel. We spoke before this about you are heavily involved not just in writing, but in commissioning content. What should be written? How should it be written? And we mentioned the tactical needs that you said you needed to be able to get ahead of events. And you also said this is not a multi-million-dollar play. It's a simple movement of the heart and a change of practice. Would you care to elaborate, please?
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
May peace be upon you. Well, first of all, let me express my gratitude and thankfulness, because it's my first time to participate in an event for KAICIID. I'd like to thank His Excellency Dr. Faisal bin Muammar, the Secretary General. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here amongst you and to share thoughts and opinions with you. Well, of course, it's very easy that all of us have a certain characterization.
Hate speech.
But the big problem is, it's not the symptoms we characterized matter, we know. So all doctors now agree on the characterization of a certain illness, but now we need to be very brave, but we kind of try to suppress this brave feeling by using tablets and using all kind of medicine to keep us calm. So in Tunisia, for instance, in these past months, we had elections. This month, we had presidential elections and parliamentarian elections, and we had a very widespread hate speech between the different participants. You had 109 pages on Facebook with all kinds of hate speech against participants in the elections. So one participant against the other. And we had also this motto, the heart of Tunis, and of course, heart in Arabic is qalb. And if you change the first letter and turn it into K, it would have the meaning of dark. So instead of having the heart of Tunisia, it would be the dark of Tunisia. Also, we had the hate speech of the Sunni parties in Lebanon, for instance, and they invented a crisis and said that migrants are responsible for the crisis. So we often see hate speech organized and orchestrated by outer parties or people from outside. So
there are citizenship journalists, there are les journalistes citoyens, ما نسميه بالمواطن الصحفي.
We have journalist citizens. This is the major problem. But today, everyone can stand up and say he's or she is a journalist. So now, countering hate speech, we could have thousands of journalists, not only one. You only need a mobile phone, which costs less than $50.
In New York Times, Independent, in any of that, no, it's enough that you have that. For that, اليوم هنالك تغييرات.
Therefore, today we have many changes in society, changes with the media. Today we are speaking about the new media, social media, alternative media, but alternative media would be our chance to counter hate speech. So we should not only be in the position of reacting. Now we still are kind of standing there reacting, but we need to move forward. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to take steps, we need to take measures, we need to move forward in order to be able to counter hate speech. We need platforms, for instance. Platforms are not expensive, ladies and gentlemen. It's very easy to create a platform. A state, an organization, an institution can create a platform. And we have states, for instance, spending hundreds of thousands of US dollars for such platforms in order to orchestrate matters, in order to control matters. But if we think of creating such a platform, it doesn't take much. It would be a short video, for instance, being published on this platform. A video, for instance, if you publish a video today of this session, of this discussion, not longer than 1 minute, that religious leaders came together and journalists came together to discuss the countering of hate speech, to discuss love.
For the sake of the translators, could we slow down the speech, please, because it's not coming. I'd also like to know, Basil, where you buy a phone for $50.
Yes, we to have a TV, and there are nothing important in this project.
No, but if we could just slow down our speech a bit for the translators.
لذلك.
Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we need to be brave. We need a framework moving us forward in order to have a strategy, to put down a strategy to counter hate speech. It's not enough to react. It's not enough to have reactions. It's fine and good. But we need people thinking, people preparing strategies, people taking matters down, planning. It's like a normal person. A normal person who would have a certain objective, he'd put down a plan, he'd plan to reach this objective. Now we really have a great chance being here together. Thanks again to KAICIID. And this is not such only a compliment. I mean it. I mean what I say. We may put down a journalistic strategy, a media strategy, for instance, in order to have a common speech, to have a common voice, in order to take steps, to take initiatives which should not be expensive, but should have an echo, should have effects. For instance, publishing videos. People would search for videos and would look at such videos randomly. They'd find the video and just look at it randomly. This would be a great chance for all of us in order to counter hate speech. Hate speech, ladies and gentlemen, is not linked to dictatorship, not linked to democracy or humankind, or to countries respecting human rights and not respecting human rights. But it's quite clear that these very plain feelings of people are often used in order to reach certain interests, in order to reach certain goals. For instance, economic crisis may be used for hate speech. All kinds of phobia, for instance. You have been speaking about Europe. Now, we have the world, which is much bigger than Europe. We have the global media. We have a global human rights agreement. So today, in Europe, you have 10,000 of migrants, of refugees who are not respected, whose rights are not respected, whose religion is not respected, and who are not treated in a way to safeguard their dignity. In Italy, for instance, in Lampedusa, people do not respect. There are organizations calling for the respect of migrants, but in these places, often these rights are not respected. Also in the Central African Republic, it's a basis for hate speech.
Word, which was Italy, and with that in mind, we will move to Alessandra. Alessandra, not only are you from Europe, but you're also young, and so you would have a perspective which, without insulting, except maybe on the that we might not naturally have, a youth perspective on hate speech. Please explain first why you're here, who you are, and why you're entitled to speak, and then please go ahead and talk about hate speech in Europe. It's okay.
Thank you. So, thank you for inviting me. My name is Alessandra Coppola. I'm Italian, and I'm a human rights defender and activist, first of all. I'm involved in youth education for human rights, and I've been involved in the No Hate Speech movement campaign of Council of Europe since 2014. This is an initiative that was built as a response to the Utøya massacre, 22nd July 2011. And this was a first very shocking hate crime who involved young people for the fact of being young and for the fact of willing to create a dialogue in the diversity of the Norway society. So the other element of this is that this hate crime was organized and diffused before its perpetration through new media, through social media. It's not new that murderers decide to spread the intention, a manifesto of making a very strong crime through like the classic media, on the internet, on the inner website. But in this case, the media that were used were the social media in a period in which it was not so much diffused as now, the use of social media in the daily life. So can you imagine if today we have this situation repeated? And unfortunately we had, because if I say today Utoya, maybe not all the young people remember, but if I say Christchurch, then it's much fresh.
Yeah.
And Christchurch attack was built on the model of Utoya attack.
Yeah.
So for this reason, young people from all over Europe, in the framework of Council of Europe, decided to take a step for human rights online and offline, and to produce an answer, a concrete answer from the youth sector, from the youth of Europe to this phenomenon. And to use the same channels, the same media that were used to spread the hate, to use the same social media with another reverse narrative to spread a human rights-based narrative. So what is this about? This is about find the line between freedom of expression, the extremely positive impact that social media, new media can have on our possibility to participate in society, because the new media gave all of us the chance to have a voice, to equally participate in society. Each one of us can be producer, can be author, can be writer. And this is a very important opportunity. But this can be also a very nightmare weapon if we use this not for creating bridges, not for creating dialogue, but for creating wars in another way, online. So the idea here is to be responsible citizens of the online space, because the online space is not anymore a virtual space. It's a digital space, but it's real. And what we do online, it's real. And it has the same effects on people, on life, on also in the legal framework now. And we cannot ignore the fact that we have to behave in a way that is considered safe for human dignity. So the perspective of youth in this campaign, the idea of youth was to main act for three things: for preventing hate speech through education, human rights education, to stop hate speech through denouncing, reporting to the new media, and to counter hate speech through counter and alternative narrative, meaning that, for example, if something happened in the moment, I try to counter the speech that is ongoing in order to stop the escalation of hate. For example, if a discussion on sexism is ongoing online, what we do as activists, we don't engage in a conversation, because this can escalate very fast in a conflict and also in danger in the offline world. What we do is, for example, and we did it, we take a picture of the cigarette pack with this image that says like smoking damage the brain.
Yeah.
And we change it, and we, for example, put sexism damage the brain health, for example. It's sort of meme, satiric image, but it's very effective because you just post it after a post, and it's immediately create this sort of laugh, this sort of like haha moment of, okay, maybe I'm going too far with this discussion. I need to stop because it's not respectful. And then in a second moment, we engage in a conversation based on alternative narrative, meaning that we deconstruct the prejudice and we offer an alternative human rights-based narrative that can explain why that prejudice was wrong. And we try to do this with a youth language, using the same media that was used to spread the hate. So this is what we do.
Can I open to the panel? I hope you will get this question. If you don't understand the question, just skip it. There is the question of actively engaging. What would happen if anonymity was removed? When you post, when you make a thing, if you had to post under your own name, as you know, in some legal circles, I believe these things are being, do you think fighting it, or do you think that simply saying that if you want to use Facebook, if you want to, you post under your own name? I'll just go through you. And don't go into a lecture, just say yes or no. Burhan.
Just yes or no?
Yeah, well, you can have one sentence.
I would remove anonymity from the...
You would remove anonymity?
Remove anonymity from the equation.
Pass it.
I normally act with my name, but I understand that for security reasons, for safety reasons, and for expression reason, it could also be useful to have like these nicknames.
Yes.
And by the way, even if we use anonymity, we are not anonymous online. So, sorry, it's useless.
Father Rifat.
If I receive any message from anybody who is anonymous and the name is not clear, I delete it. And I never used any name than my name. We have to be direct and credible.
Sultan, when you engage in social media, do you your name or David Niven or...
Of course.
That's yours.
أنا أستخدم اسمي الصريح دائما في السوشيال ميديا الحديث.
No, I use my own name in all causes I write about.
What do you think?
I generally know anonymity, but I personally use a nickname using Facebook for safety reasons. And but if the network is created in a safe way, I believe that nobody should conceal behind some anonymous nicknames. But it's not the situation right now.
Yeah. Finally, Basil, what do you think?
I think that we need to find solution of this problem. The solution that not to put your name or to use other name, to that the responsible of this platform, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, must they have the real address and the real name of this people for their security and for the security when you put something dangerous. It's not enough to close or to say that you haven't a right to publish for 15 days or that. No, that they can help the administration and help the law to applicate it in this area.
Absolutely. It's true, though, that the more vile the statement is, the more people recede into anonymity. I don't know whether there's a way of measuring that. Sultan, if we could bounce back out. We are a highly mobile panel now. Sultan, you're into the DNA of, I think it's working. Yeah, that's right. Tell us about the broad themes we've been discussing here. Responsibility of journalists in the Middle East, because here is the thing. When I was an editor and the bombs went off in London, 2005, killing over 50 people, and we were stunned because when the videos came afterwards, these people had regional Yorkshire accents. I was then editor of The Telegraph, and of course the whole country was angry, and it was angry at Islam, at immigration, at Muslims, at the lack of integration, at all of this stuff. So I knew then, as an editor, what my readers wanted to hear, okay? What my readers wanted to hear. Now, at that point, I took a decision in the coverage to include a piece by the head or the secretary of the Muslim Council of Britain. And we gave them an opinion piece the day after, on the day of the bombing, but it appeared the day after the bombing. I didn't like doing that because I knew my audience didn't want me to do that. So this is what I'm getting at. When you are commissioning, Bassem, when you're commissioning, when you are saying what's right and how it's written, do you have to hold yourself back sometimes? Because you know what people think. You know what will get you more clicks. But what will get you more clicks is often not good.
صباح الخير جميعا سعيد أنه أكون بينكم هذا اليوم في هذا المركز الذي
Good morning. I am so glad to be here today in this International Dialogue Center, which has turned into a very important international platform due to the efforts of His Excellency Secretary General Faisal bin Muammar. So due thanks to you all. When we talk about media role in hatred speech, then I think this is a great responsibility because the media has a responsibility to monitor it and to not become one of the most dangerous platforms. If media outlets became the voice of terrorist organizations or became the voice to incite acts of violence or terrorism, then this will become canon. It will become acceptable in the public view, and this is the great threat. We must not fall into the traps of those extremists who try to propagate the idea that there is a certain religion or a certain civilization which is solely responsible for violence or for terrorism and for killing. We must be realistic. We must be rational in our thinking and know that it is not just the matter of one religion. It is not just a matter of race. It is not just a matter of this. And so hate cannot be the answer. We have to always realize that we are full partners in this human civilization. There has never been any civilization that came out of nowhere. All civilizations fed and learned from the former and prior civilizations. So we have to be honest amongst ourselves that all civilizations have had both extremists and love doers and benefit doers. So our message should be fostering dialogue and also fostering logic, because without those things, we turn out to be the enemies instead of the coexistent livers in this world. So
Said it extremely eloquently. Thank you for that. But you live also in a market, right? You've got to sell copies.
I'm coming to that.
Ah, right. This is what I'm saying. You've talked now like a dialogue practitioner. Now talk like a journalist. Right?
وهذا اللي أنا يعني أريد التأكيد عليه إنه في المؤسسة الإعلامية يجب عليك.
This is what I wanted to stress, that in the media institution, we must never tolerate hate speech. Sometimes we see that hate speech starts as a really small seed through maybe a hashtag or maybe a small article, maybe a sentence in an article, but we must denounce these works through our efforts in the media and through our articles. We must always strive that all efforts of extremists and terrorists to be seen, to represent themselves as heroes, that these never go through. And we have to always view hate speech as a speech that is countering humanity. Thank you.
If I may, to Burhan, I think it's, and then to Father Rifat, who will provide perhaps an alternative view. Burhan, there is a question that certainly in the West regarding speech and offense, there is a difference between offense and there is a difference between hate speech. And often the legislation or legal repercussion of saying something online can kick in at the level of offense and not at the level of hate. Can you develop this point? Because in the UK, certainly, and in other parts of the, not having got ahead of this problem, not having defined hate speech, not having done these things, means that, at least in my impression, there are real incursions into freedom of expression. It is always best that you hang yourself with your words than somebody else hangs you, right? So this is a particular area. I don't know if it's happening in your region, but it's happening here. The police in the UK can visit you if you say one tweet about a transgender issue or something, which should be, you know, and it's immediately the repercussion is as though you had said hate, when all you had done is be offensive. Burhan, would you elaborate on that? Have we got a microphone, please?
Yes, I think that's true. I think that's probably quite a modern development as well, which is to some degree aggravated by social media. I don't necessarily think that media organizations have been particularly good at framing it in the way that you just did. You know, it's not always practiced in this way. What quite often tends to happen is that, you know, especially when it comes to, say, newspaper columns, for example, issues where you could probably argue fair comment and free speech are quite often packaged with fairly intemperate headlines, you know, and that becomes kind of clickbait for the click farm, you know. So somebody might actually be trying to make quite a reasonable point about, you know, integration or assimilation or immigration to the UK, but the headline quite often tells a completely different story, and most people never get beyond reading the headline. It's a real challenge.
Yes. Father, if we can return to your area again, what is hate speech as it's currently defined, whoever's defining it? How does it occur in your region? What's the point at which you would say, that is hate speech, and the point at which you would say, grow up? You know?
بعض الدول العربية قد أقرت قوانين لمكافحة
Most Arabic countries have made legal efforts to criminalize hate speech, and some Arabic countries are still waiting upon it. But I think offending somebody for his personality is what we can define hate speech. Sometimes maybe we can write something general, not aimed at a specific person, but this writing could be understood as an attack on a certain person. Secondly, this hatred speech, when it is aimed at one person specifically, or their family, or their personal life, their marriage, their divorce, their social life, this is something private. When this is attacked, then I believe that this is a crime of hate speech and must be punished. In Jordan, for example, there is no law, as in the United Emirates, to criminalize hate speech, but there is a police force fighting digital crimes, fighting cyber crimes. And this is where repercussions can happen to perpetrators of this hate speech.
Clara, the issue of offense versus hate. How do you recognize it?
For me, it's quite easy because I stick to the law and to the international covenants, and
it's a lawyer's response.
Yeah, it's it's easy, but I would really stress the needs of victims, as I said before, and we really need to put a perspective of individuals into this debate, because hate speech may be extremely harmful, and people it's proven already by various researches that hate crime victims develop post-traumatic stress disorder more often than people who suffer a normal crime. So hate speech is a crime under certain circumstances when it defames nation, when it defames religion, when it defames ethnic group. It's also a crime when it incites to violence against an individual or a group of people. So at that circumstances, there's a need to protect people and to prevent perpetrators from doing so. On one level, I know that it's not easy to clear platforms from hate speech, and in that matter we should really focus on people who do that on purpose, who are hate leaders. Because sometimes what we see is criminalization of silly individuals, whereas we should really focus on people who trigger this hateful environment, and we should really push the platforms to prevent this behavior and to create a safe environment.
Yeah, Alessandra, being a young person as well, just let me, we of my age, certainly in the West, now look at, you've heard the term woke, have you? The younger generation of today, the snowflakes, we say, oh, they're very delicate people, and this patronizing attitude taken certainly in the West by the old towards the young. In the light of that, do you believe that you're a generation that takes offense too easily, or?
Okay, I would like to also reconnect with this discussion and add my perspective. So, under our activist point of view, the big difference between offense and hate speech is the incitement to take an action in order to violate other people's human rights. That means that if the offense is from one side to another side, so two parts. Hate speech is one side that offend another side and call other people from third parts to join in violate human rights of the other part. But these imply that the social media, the new media, that are per se a multiplier of like a big megaphone of the expression of one side, they turn immediately in the offense in hate speech in a very automatic way. Because when we say something, we write something, we state something online, it's not anymore a bilateral discussion. It becomes a multilateral discussion. So also the violation is multilateral. That's why offense online turn easily into hate speech. And how young people can act on this phenomenon, and are they reliable? Are they trustful? They care about this? Yes, no, why? In my opinion, and in our opinion, young people are really change maker, are in a possibility of being change maker, of a sense of being part of this humanity, of this civilization, as it was mentioned, because we are used to this way of living together that is not anymore only offline, but also in this digital unified version of being human. So in my opinion, in our opinion, it's our responsibility to be aware how it works, how the new media works in making connection, and being aware that what I say here now can affect another young person in the other side of the world. But it's media responsibility to provide a space that is safe, that is regulated. So it's a shared responsibility. I think that young people are aware, from my generation, let's say, are aware of the power of this tool that is the online world, because we are constantly living in it. We have this constant interaction with the online life. So if from one side it can be perceived that young people lives in a more like bubble life, like less responsible setting, from the other side, I think that we are very much able to make a step, make a point, and reach results in the topic of combating hate speech, and also that we can be valuable resources to support the new media in find a way to regulate and combat hate speech, safeguarding the freedom of expression that is very important. So I think that we are a very important how can I say, resource. So use your young people, get in touch with your young people in your community, and also because who is educating young people? Families, religious leaders, you, the media. So this has to be done together in order to really create a change in the evolution of the discourse, in the way in which we coexist also online. So it's also your responsibility as religious leaders. You have to be aware on how it works, the life online. And I'm sure that you has a page on Facebook also to promote your religious view. It's normal. It's a way also of to spread the message, to educate young people. So you are also in the possibility, in the position of being responsible of what happened on your social media. How do you prevent hate speech from a religious perspective?
Excellent.
So it's a mix.
That's an excellent observation. Yeah, very well said. Religious leaders, let's get into. First, I'll simply ask the question, Basil first, if I may. Religious leaders, media, hate speech, part of the problem or part of the solution?
شكرا فقط يعني نقطة مهمة.
Thank you very much. I'd like to point out a very important matter. We spoke about cybercrime and police prosecuting cybercrime. And here we often ask police institutions, ask victims to go to police and file a case, though we know that the Minister for Justice and also the public prosecutor should be in the service of society, should protect society, and often cybercrime is a general crime. It's a crime of offending security of the country. So if a person, for instance, offends another person because of this other person's religion, so it shouldn't be the responsibility of the victim to go and file a case. On the contrary, because many times this file or this so-called case then stays on the desks or disappears somewhere because the person, the victim, doesn't have the means, for instance, to take a lawyer or doesn't know that he has the certain rights. So we need to criminalize such hate speech. We need to criminalize even of certain offensive actions in regard to religions, because if the public prosecutor, if the police, if the state interferes, then things look different. We should not wait for the victim and ask the victim to go and file the case, because it's an offense. It's not like people having a quarrel, for instance. But now, in regard to your question and religious leaders and journalists, if we are part of the problems or part of the solution, I think we are part of the crisis. We being religious leaders, we being journalists, we need to see that hate speech is directed at all of us. Because if any person offends someone with hate speech because of his religion, because of his conviction, even when watching a football game, for instance, you'd have hate speech. I do not want to mention countries, but all of us witnessed here in Europe, we witnessed groups using hate speech as their motto while they were watching a football game. So for me as a journalist, I cannot gather 50,000 people to speak to them, but during a football game, for instance, or a soccer game, I may gather 50,000 people, 100,000 people, and talk to them. So we may publish matters and present these publications to such a crowd. So if religious leaders, if we journalists are still part of the problems, we need to change our actions. We need to change our attitude in order to be part of the solution. This could be very easy. That is, taking up action just once or twice a week with 2 words against hate. Thank you.
You jumping up and down in your seat about this. Father Rifat and then Sultan, and we've got 10 minutes now, then we open to the floor. So if you two could finish up, and then we'll open to the floor. Please keep it inside 10 minutes. Thank you.
sorry, بس
in regard to religious leaders, and please excuse me, many times religious leaders were really part of the problem, because we heard religious leaders publishing hate speech and even speaking up with hate speech on TV. For instance, if a religious leader comes up in TV and says it's forbidden to go to a Christian and to celebrate the Christian feast with a Christian, this is part of the problem. So how can a victim also, we need to make a victim aware of how to deal with hate speech. Now, 800 years past today, dear ladies and gentlemen, after the Holy Francis spoke to Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, to Saladin in Jerusalem. And we should be remembered by the world after 500 years, after 800 years, that we are the ones who created the speech of love instead of the hate speech. We are all responsible, the religious leaders, journalists. So as we say in Lebanon, all in all, we are all responsible. Thank you. I do not want to speak who are part of the problem. I'd like to speak of those who are part of the solution. We have thinkers, we have intellectuals, we have religious leaders who stood up within their community and who spoke out loud and who said, we need to respect the other, we need to accept the other, so we need to make those voices heard.
I would just like to personally thank the panel for fantastic observations. It's been really a pleasure moderating, especially your last observation was to religious leaders. You have been told, religious leaders. Please, I'd like to open to the floor. If anyone has any questions, sir. Have we got a microphone over here, please? Anyone? It's coming. And who? Is it to the panel as a whole or to anyone in the panel?
Thank you very much. This is to the panel. Imam Mohammed Ismail from the United Kingdom. My role is, we have an organization called Tell Mama, and I'm the advisory board member for Yorkshire region. I also have responsibility for South Yorkshire Police ethic panels lead person for the religious abuse, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia. I'm leading a very big mosque, which is Central Mosque Birmingham, and also working in Sheffield University. I deal daily with actually Islamophobia and also anti-Semitism. My question, I totally agree with you that we religious leaders have problems, and and hopefully this conference, for which I congratulate KAICIID, its directors, its heads, and its boards, and all its cabinets for organizing such an important conference. But my question to the media is that before the issue of Brexit referendum, I'm sorry to say Brexit again, and before that, but since then, we found in Tel Mama thousands of news pieces in the British media, and that's very subjectively Islamophobic and risen to alarming states and stage. And in some cases, they were really abhorrent, abusive of Muslim women particularly. What is the reason why Western media, I'm saying as media in the East shows some tolerance and respect. I follow Arab media as well. But actually, I see the Western media, particularly tabloid, and in fact, with all the respect, you know, Telegraph is not actually an exception in this regard, but actually it's very sad why the media is becoming stigmatizing minorities in such a developed Western countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Burhan, if he could lead with this. Burhan, you know Tel Mama very well, and is very involved in precisely the area you're talking about.
Well, I'm really glad you're here, and I'm very glad that you brought that up. Unfortunately, I have nothing but bad news for you at this point. My experience in the media has been that certainly since the events of September the 11th, and this might be partly because I went off to live in the Middle East, and then I came back. I came back to the UK just after Brexit happened, so I might be able to speak directly to what you've experienced. But my overarching opinion about this is that certainly in the last 18, 19 years, the British media has done a particularly terrible job of informing average Brits about what Muslims aspire to in the UK and their contributions to the UK. You know, I'm quite regularly invited to debates where people talk about, you know, why Muslims haven't liberalized fast enough, or why they haven't, you know, embraced British values fast enough. My counter-argument to this is one of the most popular football players in the UK is a Muslim. Some of our leading fashion designers are Muslim. If Britain has a national dish, it would be a curry. You know. Now, this is not reflected in the media. You know, you don't really see this argued on the opinion pages. You don't see this reflected in news coverage. You know, it's usually a kind of us against them. And I think this has been like a major challenge, which is obviously coalesced around some of the issues that you talk about after Brexit.
And if you could talk about anti-Semitism as well, which, as we know, the Labour government has been shot through with allegations of anti-Semitism. It's been a real problem for their political standing. Burhan.
And again, this is something which has existed on the margins of political ideologies on the left for quite some time, but has been allowed to fester, again, predominantly online. And again, sections of the media have not done a good enough, fast enough job in replying to some of this.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Burhan. We have 5 minutes now, so I think that's one more question. Over in the back.
Thank you. Ulrich Nitschke is my name. I'm the director of the International Partnership on Religion and Sustainable Development. Thank you very much for the invitation. I think there was a groundbreaking proposal yesterday by His Excellency, the Under Secretary General to Prevent Genocide, Adama Dieng, to convene all the stakeholders around the table and initiate systems of monitoring and accountability in terms of hate speech and incitement. And I would really like the panel to react on that. Is that the way forward? We all know the UN has the capacity to convene. KAICIID, our good selves with 120 member states and members in part, we would be happy to see something like that. Because if that can be a signal from this conference, I think you will really break new ground.
I will throw that question. Who wants to take that? Clara.
I haven't been here yesterday, but there is lots of monitoring systems in place already. Within Europe, at least, the OBS, ODIHR monitors hate crime, hate speech, as well as Fundamental Rights Agency, as well as on national levels, hate speech and hate crime is monitored. I simply don't believe in numbers. I believe in storytelling. So what we really need and what's the way forward, it's storytelling, the stories of people who died because of hate speech in Christchurch, for example, or Utoya. Storytelling stories of people who were failed by the criminal justice system, and stories of those people who were hurt. So I don't really believe in monitoring. I believe in acceptance of needs of victims.
Thank you, Clara. And the final word from Italy.
Thank you.
Very brief, if you would. Thank you.
I believe that an alliance to cooperate for preventing and combating hate speech is very needed. And I really believe that if we put around a very big and long table the stakeholders from the different areas of expertise, the different religious parts, the different ages that are involved in this phenomenon, young people can make a difference. We can offer our expertise, our what was our experience in these last 5 years. Just for you to know, last week we founded an international organization because we take this topic serious. It is called No Hate Speech Network. Please search young people from the No Hate Speech Network in your country. Involve them in the discussion. Bring this at international level, because I really believe that a multi-stakeholder alliance for combating hate speech is very needed to make a step forward for a peaceful coexistence. And you are really the important stakeholder here. So it's your turn to start.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the panel finally. I thought that was absolutely excellent. A huge variety of opinion, all of it relevant. I hope that you will circulate later for people there who may want to talk individually to some of the panel about what they've said. Certainly we've got a lot of repository of knowledge here, which is very valuable. Thank you all very much. Thank you, panel. There'll be a short announcement.
For moderating this fascinating panel. 1 more minute, please stay seated. First, those of you who have signed up in the back for the afternoon workshops, the 3 different options, thank you very much, but several of you have not yet, so I invite you during the break to do so. Second point, there is a number of you who are departing today. If you could verify your departure time and coordinate with the hospitality desk at the entrance of the hotel 2 floors above during the break, that would be very helpful. Third, the panel here is asked to stay for a picture, and after your picture, we ask all the members of the Arab platform to come up in front and have a picture of their own. And finally, you have until noon for the break, because we're returning at noon for the 3rd part of this morning's program with a wonderful second panel. Thank you.
n'a pas pu poser la question. Non, c'est ça, c'est ça.
Non, mais il y a tellement de trucs.
Il faut
Vous
être
savez,
rapide. Hein, pour
oui,
poser.
oui, et puis c'est important parce qu'il y a surtout la génération des nouvelles moyens. Il faut chercher des solutions.
Oui.
La mauvaise nouvelle, ça fait... La bonne, elle dort.